The hopeful star drifted silently through the vastness of space, its hull gleaming softly against the backdrop of distant stars. The ship was a symbol of peace, a floating hospital designed to offer aid to those in need across countless galaxies. Its crew was trained to heal, not to fight. Their mission was simple: to bring relief to the wounded and the sick. With no weapons and no armor, they were far from prepared for what was about to happen. The first sign of trouble came without warning. The ship's sensors blared to life as an unidentified fleet appeared on the horizon. It was large, far larger than anything the hopeful star had ever encountered. The crew scrambled to respond, but there was no time before the comms officer could even issue a warning. A barrage of fire erupted from the alien ships, cutting through the blackness and tearing into the hospital ship's fragile defenses. The explosion rocked the vessel, sending crew members flying from their stations. Alarms blared in every corridor, and the ship shuddered with the force of each new impact. Captain Lyra Westmore stood frozen at the helm, her heart racing, as she watched the screen flicker to life with the alien ships, their jagged and menacing shapes, filling every inch of the view. The Xanthians were here. Their reputation for brutality preceded them. They had no mercy, no sense of restraint. They were known across the galaxy for their ruthless raids, but no one had expected them to attack a hospital ship of all things. The hopeful star had no weapons and no defenses. Its mission was purely humanitarian. "Captain, they're targeting the engines," shouted Ensign Riley from the back of the bridge, his voice strained. "If we don't do something fast, we won't have the power to escape." Lyra's mind raced. She knew they were defenseless, and yet the thought of surrender was unimaginable. This ship represented more than just a lifeline to the injured and the ill. It was a beacon of hope to those in the darkest corners of space. It could not fall. It would not fall. "Divert all power to shields," she ordered, her voice steadied despite the panic rising within her. "Prepare to send a distress signal to Earth now." The crew moved quickly, but they all knew it was too late. The Xanthians were relentless, and their fire tore through the ship like paper. Their weapons were unlike anything the crew had ever seen, faster, stronger than anything humanity had ever encountered before. Each shot hit with the force of a hammer, each explosion rocking the ship to its core. Lyra held her breath as she watched the damage reports flood in. Every minute that passed brought them closer to complete destruction. On the lower levels of the ship, chaos erupted as fires spread and crew members fought to contain them. In the medical bay, doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to save those who were injured, even as the ship crumbled around them. The sound of screams echoed through the halls, a constant reminder of how fragile life could be in this hostile universe. Lyra's mind was focused on one thing above all else: survival. She had to keep the crew alive. She had to get the message out to Earth. The only hope they had was if they could reach home before it was too late. But even as she sent the distress signal, she knew that time was running out. The hopeful star was no longer the symbol of peace it had once been. Now, it was a ship under siege, fighting for its very life against an enemy that showed no mercy. The distress signal from the hopeful star arrived on Earth like a thunderclap. Its message carried through the void with desperation and fear. The United Earth Council gathered urgently in their war rooms as the news spread across every communication channel. The attack on a hospital ship, humanitarian and unarmed, was not just an isolated incident. It was an unprovoked act of war. The room was filled with murmurs of disbelief as officials processed the devastating news. "What do we know about the attackers?" Counselor Jacobs demanded, his voice cold and steady, despite the gravity of the situation. "Xanthians," replied Captain Dias, a fleet commander and military advisor. "We've encountered them before, but never like this. They are notorious for their raids, but this..." She trailed off, her expression dark. "This is a message, a declaration." The council's silence was heavy, every member realizing the consequences of such an attack. No one in the room was ignorant of the Xanthian threat, but this was different. This wasn't an isolated skirmish. This was a direct assault on the heart of what humanity stood for. A hospital ship, designed to bring peace and aid, had been torn apart with no provocation, and its crew was left to die in the dark corners of space. Earth cannot let this go unanswered. General Marcus Hall, the head of Earth's military, said firmly. "We must retaliate. We cannot allow this act of violence to stand." The room erupted with murmurs of agreement and dissent, each member weighing the costs of war. Some argued for diplomacy, to find a way to negotiate with the Xanthians, but others were already leaning toward a more decisive response. It was clear that diplomacy would not work with a race as brutal as the Xanthians. This wasn't about talks or compromises. It was about survival. Finally, the president stood, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "The Xanthians have attacked our own. They have crossed a line. We will not stand down. Earth's war fleet will respond, and we will bring the fight to them." With those words, the decision was made. Earth's fleet, the most advanced in the galaxy, was about to be mobilized. It had been years since it had seen real combat, but it had been prepared for this moment. Thousands of warships, both massive and agile, were docked and ready, their crews trained to defend Earth from any threat. The Council immediately began issuing orders, the military began assembling its forces, and the first wave of ships set their course for the Xanthian-controlled space. As the orders were sent out across Earth's vast network, something remarkable happened. People from all over the planet began to rally. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers, eager to defend their world, their home. The call to arms was answered not only by the military but by every corner of society. Scientists, engineers, and medical personnel began to prepare for the consequences of war. Earth was not just sending its fleet, it was sending its people, united in a singular purpose. Within hours, the streets of Earth's major cities were filled with advertisements and messages encouraging citizens to do their part. Civilians rallied to support the war effort in every way possible. The human spirit, often underestimated by those outside their world, was now a force to be reckoned with. People who had never seen a battlefield would soon find themselves part of a war that would echo through the stars. The fleet, now fully mobilized, was ready to depart. Every ship, every soldier, every volunteer understood that the stakes were higher than they had ever been before. The hopeful star had been attacked, but it had become a symbol of humanity's resolve, and a symbol of the price they were willing to pay for peace. As the warships powered up their engines and prepared for launch, there was no question in anyone's mind. Earth's response would be swift, and it would be devastating. As Earth's fleet assembled in the vast hangars and docking bays of the great orbital stations, the air was thick with tension and anticipation. The warships, some towering giants with advanced weaponry, others sleek and agile with cutting-edge technology, were all aligned, ready to face the Xanthian threat. Every fleet commander, every soldier, every engineer knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival, about showing the galaxy that humanity would not be crushed, would not be cowered by any alien race. In the depths of Earth's military command centers, strategists pored over star maps, projecting the path the fleet would take and plotting the most efficient attack routes. Intelligence reports on Xanthian tactics and weaknesses were analyzed in minute detail. The Xanthians had shown no mercy, and the response needed to be precise and unforgiving. Every decision made here would have the power to shape the course of the war. Outside the military hubs, on the streets of Earth's cities, people's lives were already being altered. Many were still in shock, unsure of how to process the reality that a peaceful hospital ship, carrying Earth's own doctors and medical staff, had been attacked. But soon, the anger started to grow. The feeling of powerlessness was replaced by something stronger, a sense of unity. People from every nation, every continent, began to understand that this wasn't just the military's fight. This was everyone's fight. Earth had been attacked, and every person, no matter their background, had a part to play in the response. Volunteer forces flooded recruitment stations, not just for the military, but for the medical corps, logistics teams, and engineers. Those who couldn't fight directly still offered their skills in support of the war effort. Children, too young to enlist, painted messages of support on the walls of their neighborhoods, sending out their solidarity to those who would face the Xanthians. The entire planet was coming together like never before, united by a single purpose. At the heart of the preparations, Captain Lyra Westmore of the Hopeful Star became an icon of resilience. She was still recovering from the trauma of the attack, her mind consumed by the loss of so many of her crew, but she knew what had to be done. She wasn't just a captain anymore. She was a symbol of humanity's resolve. The survivors from her ship were being brought to Earth's fleet, where they would serve as witnesses to the attack and provide vital intelligence. Their first-hand accounts of the Xanthians' brutal tactics would be invaluable in planning the next moves. On the ships, the atmosphere was tense but determined. Crew members and soldiers trained day and night, preparing for the long journey ahead. Pilots practiced simulated maneuvers, testing their skills in the virtual space of simulators. Mechanics worked tirelessly to ensure the ships were battle-ready, checking every system, every weapon, every engine. And all the while, commanders and strategists planned, knowing the fleet would face the full wrath of the Xanthian military when they arrived. As Earth's warships powered up their engines, leaving the safety of the planet's orbit, the world watched. Every person, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, knew that the fate of humanity had been sealed in that moment. The fleet, made up of the best and brightest humanity had to offer, was on its way to Xanthian space. Every heart beat faster as the fleet entered hyperspace, the stars streaking by in a blur of light. The journey would take days, but every crew member aboard felt the weight of their mission. This wasn't just about striking back. It was about making sure no one could ever dare to attack humanity again. The storm was gathering, and with it, Earth's fierce war fleet was heading into the unknown. But one thing was clear. Humanity would not go down without a fight. The galaxy would soon learn that when Earth responds, it responds as one. The fleet plunged into hyperspace, a wave of light that blurred the stars as Earth's warships hurtled through the void. Each ship, from the towering dreadnoughts to the smaller, nimble frigates, was a testament to human engineering and determination. The journey would take several days, but time felt distorted as the fleet surged forward. Its destination set, the heart of Xanthian space. On board the flagship Eagle's Pride, Fleet Commander General Marcus Hall stood before a holographic map of the Xanthian sector. His fingers hovered over the projection as he analyzed the best route to reach their enemies. The Xanthians were notorious for their ambushes and traps, and Hall knew that their fleet would have to navigate through dangerous sectors, asteroid fields, space anomalies, and areas where the Xanthians had laid countless minefields. A direct approach was not an option. "This is no simple skirmish," Hall muttered under his breath, his voice betraying his experience in command. He looked out the viewing port at the stars streaking past, knowing that every decision made here could determine the fate of the entire fleet. "We'll need to be smarter, faster." In the war room, the mood was tense but focused. Officers and commanders sat at their stations, monitoring every system. The crew was highly trained, but even they knew that no amount of preparation could account for what lay ahead. The Xanthians had already proven themselves unpredictable, and now they were fighting a war against an Earth united in purpose. Across the fleet, crews worked nonstop, making final checks on weapons, systems, and supplies. The soldiers aboard the troop transports were preparing for the worst. The war was coming, and they knew that once they arrived in Xanthian space, there would be no turning back. Captain Lyra Westmore, still recovering from the attack on the Hopeful Star, stood on the bridge of the Rising Dawn, one of the fleet's swiftest cruisers. She had been in space for years, but this mission felt different. There was a fire in her gut now, a fierce determination that had only been fueled by the horror of her ship's destruction. The Xanthians had attacked a hospital ship, a symbol of humanity's compassion. That was something she would never forgive. "We're getting closer," she said quietly to her second-in-command, Commander Kellen Shaw. He nodded, his expression grim but resolute. They both knew the challenges ahead, but they were determined to face them head-on. The Rising Dawn was one of the ships chosen to lead the initial strike. its crew entrusted with reconnaissance and early engagement. It would scout the path ahead, clear the way for the larger, heavier warships to follow. Their job was simple: survive and secure a safe path for the main force. It was a dangerous task, but Lyra and her crew were ready. As the fleet moved deeper into uncharted space, the sense of isolation began to settle in. They were now miles away from Earth, out in the cold, empty void, surrounded only by the unknown. The reality of their mission began to weigh on the crew. In the mess halls, soldiers and officers spoke in hushed tones, each of them thinking about what awaited them. Some joked nervously to mask their anxiety, while others sat in quiet contemplation, their minds focused on the task ahead. For the first time in human history, Earth was preparing to bring the fight to an alien race in their own domain. And as the ships accelerated through hyperspace, the distance between humanity and the Xanthians grew smaller and smaller, until it would be nothing but a matter of time before the inevitable confrontation. The fleet was ready. The stage had been set. But one thing was certain: no matter the cost, no matter the odds, humanity was coming for the Xanthians, and they would not be stopped. The moment the fleet emerged from hyperspace, the vast emptiness of Xanthian space stretched before them like a cold, unforgiving ocean. No one knew exactly where the Xanthians were, but their presence was unmistakable. Scanners flickered as they picked up faint energy signatures, and the tension in the air was palpable. General Hull's voice broke the silence, his tone sharp and commanding. "Prepare for contact," he ordered. "All ships, assume battle positions." The warships shifted into formation, massive vessels aligning with perfect precision. The Eagle's Pride led the charge, its colossal hull bristling with weapons, followed by a ring of cruisers, destroyers, and frigates. Each ship was ready for the battle ahead, their crews steady and focused. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for years, and now, finally, they were on the brink of unleashing everything they had. As they moved deeper into enemy space, the first signs of the Xanthians appeared on the scanners, multiple blips, scattered across the sector. But the ships were moving too fast, too erratically. The Xanthians were testing them, probing for weaknesses. It wasn't until a massive object appeared on the horizon, an enormous Xanthian battleship, that the battle truly began. "They're coming in fast," shouted Lieutenant Tessa Hull, General Hull's daughter, who was stationed as a tactical officer aboard the Eagle's Pride. "They're not waiting for us to make the first move. It's a full-scale assault." The bridge was immediately filled with a flurry of commands. Weapon systems came online with a hum, and the crew braced themselves for the oncoming onslaught. The Xanthians wasted no time, launching a barrage of plasma fire from their massive battleship. The first strike hit one of the cruisers in the outer ring of the fleet, sending a shockwave through space that rattled every ship nearby. "Return fire," General Hull barked, his hand slamming onto the control panel. "Give them everything we've got." The fleet retaliated with a thunderous roar of weapons fire, lasers cutting through the darkness of space and striking the Xanthian ship with pinpoint accuracy. But the enemy was fast, maneuvering with the agility of a predator in the void. The Xanthian ship fired back relentlessly, and despite Earth's advanced defenses, the damage began to mount. One by one, smaller ships in the fleet were hit, their shields faltering under the intensity of the Xanthian assault. The Rising Dawn was one of the first ships to engage, its sleek hull darting through the void like a viper. Lyra Westmore, her mind focused on the task at hand, directed her crew to execute evasive maneuvers, narrowly dodging incoming blasts. The Xanthians had no mercy, no hesitation in their attack. They'd fought like animals, vicious and relentless. But the humans fought with purpose, fueled not by hatred, but by the need to protect everything they held dear. "They're flanking us," shouted Commander Shaw from the communications panel. "They're trying to cut us off." Lyra's heart raced, but she didn't hesitate. She barked out orders, directing her crew to engage their advanced countermeasures and break off from the formation. The rising dawn twisted and turned, dodging incoming fire as it weaved between enemy ships. Their weapons returned fire, striking Xanthian vessels with precise, calculated force. On the Eagle's Pride, General Hall's eyes narrowed as he watched the unfolding battle. The Xanthians had brought their full might, but they were not prepared for the adaptability and resilience of the human fleet. Every crew member aboard Earth's warships was determined to make the Xanthians regret ever attacking the hopeful star. The fight was chaotic, filled with flashing lights, the whine of energy weapons, and the eerie silence of space broken only by the roar of destruction. The battle raged on, and as the seconds turned into minutes, it was clear that this was only the beginning. The Xanthians, though fierce, were not invincible. Earth's fleet was holding their ground. The fight for the stars had begun, and Earth was sending a message. They would not back down, no matter how overwhelming the odds. With every passing moment, the resolve of Earth's forces grew stronger. They would stand firm. The Xanthians had made a grave mistake, and they would soon realize just how costly it had been. The battle had raged for hours, a brutal and unrelenting clash of steel and fire. The Xanthians had launched wave after wave of attacks, their ships relentless, their tactics savage. But Earth's fleet, despite the mounting casualties and the intense pressure, was holding its own. Every ship, from the massive dreadnoughts to the nimble cruisers, fought with a singular purpose: to avenge the hopeful star and protect their home. On the rising dawn, Captain Lyra Westmore's grip on the command chair tightened as the ship shook with another powerful hit from a nearby Xanthian destroyer. Her face was a mask of concentration, her mind calculating the next move. The ship was damaged. Its shields weakened, but they had pushed the Xanthians into a defensive position. For the first time since the battle had begun, there was a glimmer of hope. "Commander Shaw, prepare the forward cannons. Let's show them how Earth fights back," Lyra ordered, her voice cold and determined. "Aye, Captain," Shaw replied, his fingers dancing across his console. Forward cannons are targeting their lead ship, locking in. The Xanthian forces were starting to regroup, but Earth's fleet was more coordinated than they had expected. The human ships were proving harder to hit than anticipated, their crews moving with precision and speed. Earth's tactics, although untested on this scale, were proving effective. Lyra could see it in the way their enemies were hesitating, reevaluating their strategy. The rising dawn fired its weapons with a sharp crack, sending a volley of charged plasma bolts into the lead Xanthian ship. The first blast ripped through the ship's shields, and the second hit its hull with enough force to send debris into space. The enemy ship faltered, its movements erratic as its crew scrambled to recover. "We've got them on the back foot," Lyra shouted to her crew. "Don't let up. Keep pushing." On the Eagle's Pride, General Hall observed the scene with a careful eye. The tide of the battle was shifting. Earth's fleet, though battered, was slowly starting to gain the upper hand. The Xanthians had underestimated the resilience of humanity. "We've got reinforcements arriving," Lieutenant Tessa Hall called out, her voice filled with relief. "The second wave is entering the sector." Additional support from the flank. Hall's gaze hardened as he turned to face the battle unfolding before him. The Xanthians were not ready to surrender, not yet, but Earth's forces were now overwhelming them. The reinforcements brought fresh firepower, and Earth's strategic positioning was slowly wearing down the alien ships. "All ships, tighten the formation," Hall ordered. "We will crush them from all sides. Leave no room for escape." The newly arrived ships began to circle the remaining Xanthian vessels, closing in from every direction. The enemy, now outnumbered and outmaneuvered, was beginning to panic. Their ships tried to break through the encirclement, but Earth's fleet was relentless, pushing forward with the full might of humanity's military might. For every Xanthian ship that fell, the morale of Earth's fleet surged. The crews who had fought tirelessly now saw the fruits of their efforts. The human spirit, unbroken, unwavering, was proving itself on the battlefield. The message sent by the attack on the hopeful star had been clear. Humanity would not be intimidated, and they would not surrender. The Xanthians had made a mistake, and they would soon realize the consequences. But even as the battle seemed to turn in their favor, Lyra knew it wasn't over. The Xanthians were a brutal force, and they wouldn't go down without a final attempt to strike back. "Stay alert, everyone," Lyra said, her voice steady but firm. "We've won no victory yet. This fight will end when they stop moving, not a moment sooner." As the battle continued, the warships of Earth's fleet kept up the pressure, driving the Xanthians back. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Earth had taken control of the skies. And with each passing moment, the Xanthians were beginning to understand something crucial. This time, they had underestimated humanity. This time, Earth was ready to fight back. The battle had reached its crescendo, the black void of space, now alive with flashing lights and the echoes of destruction. The Xanthian fleet, though numerous and brutal, had been pushed to the edge. Earth's forces, united in their resolve, pressed on with relentless determination. They had been fighting for hours, their ships battered, their crews exhausted, but they refused to relent. The enemy was on the back foot, and now it was time to finish the fight. On the rising dawn, Captain Lyra Westmore stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the holographic display before her. The Xanthians were regrouping, but they were no longer a well-coordinated force. Their ships, disoriented and heavily damaged, had no hope of matching the sheer tenacity of Earth's fleet. Lyra's hands gripped the command console as the final phase of the plan began to unfold. "Commander Shaw, initiate the flanking maneuver," Lyra ordered, her voice calm but resolute. "We're finishing this now." "Aye, Captain," Shaw responded, his fingers already moving to execute the command. The rising dawn veered sharply to the left, sending the ship into a swift and calculated arc around the remaining Xanthian vessels. Behind them, the rest of Earth's fleet followed suit, splitting into smaller groups to surround the enemy. General Hall's voice came through the comms, his tone sharp and urgent. "Do not let them escape. Cut them off at all costs. The last thing we need is for them to regroup." The final Xanthian battleship, their flagship, had taken the brunt of the fight. It was limping now, its shields flickering and hull smoking from the damage it had sustained. But it was still a formidable threat, and its commander was not one to surrender easily. The last desperate hope of the Xanthians was to break through Earth's encirclement and escape back to their homeworld. If they succeeded, the war would drag on, and the message they had sent would have been ignored. But Lyra knew there was no escaping this time. She had seen the fear in the eyes of the Xanthian captains, the way their ships hesitated, as if they could sense the end was near. "Lock on the final coordinates," Lyra ordered. "Target the flagship's propulsion systems. We're taking them out." The rising dawn lined up its weapons, a silent, deadly precision behind each shot. The forward cannons fired, sending charged blasts streaking through space toward the Xanthian battleship. The first hit landed squarely on the ship's rear engines, causing a massive explosion that rocked the enemy vessel. It faltered, and in that instant, Earth's fleet closed in. General Hall's voice crackled over the comms again. "All ships, focus your fire. This ends here." The remaining Xanthian ships tried to retaliate, but they were outmatched. Earth's fleet moved in synchrony, every ship firing as one, each shot finding its mark. The once proud Xanthian battleship was torn apart piece by piece, its shields collapsing and its weapon systems going dark. The crew inside, though fierce, could do nothing to halt the onslaught. With one final, catastrophic explosion, the Xanthian flagship disintegrated, sending debris scattering into the cold expanse of space. The remaining Xanthian ships, now leaderless and broken, attempted a retreat, but it was too late. Earth's forces closed the gap, finishing off the stragglers with quick, precise strikes. The fight was over. Lyra stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the victory sinking in. The sounds of cheers and triumph erupted from her crew, but she remained focused, her gaze fixed on the now quiet battlefield. The Xanthian fleet had been obliterated, their threat vanquished. The message had been sent. Humanity would not be intimidated, and they would defend their own at any cost. General Hall's voice came through the comms once more, filled with pride and finality. This is Earth's victory. We stand strong, and we send our message to the stars. Earth's fleet had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The Xanthian threat had been dealt a heavy blow, but Lyra knew there would be more to come. Yet, as the smoke of the battle settled, one thing was certain. Humanity had proven itself. They were no longer just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with. The war would continue, but Earth had shown that they would fight and win, no matter the cost. In the aftermath of the battle, the silence of space was almost deafening. The Xanthian fleet had been destroyed, their ships either in pieces or drifting aimlessly through the void. Earth's warships, though battered and scarred, stood tall amidst the wreckage. The victory was undeniable, but it was a hard-won one, and the cost of war was evident in the wounded crews and the fallen comrades who had given everything to secure humanity's survival. On the Eagle's Pride, General Hall surveyed the damage to his ship with a sense of both pride and sorrow. The victory was theirs, but the loss of life weighed heavily on him. He knew that many families would mourn the loss of their loved ones, and the scars left on those who survived would take much longer to heal. Still, in his heart, he understood that this victory was more than just a military success. It was a turning point for humanity. "We did it," Lieutenant Tessa Hall said, standing beside her father on the bridge. She could see the toll the battle had taken on him, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We've shown them that Earth will never back down." General Hall nodded solemnly. "We've shown them, yes. But now we have to make sure this victory counts. The Xanthians may be gone for now, but there are other threats out there, and we need to be ready." Far away on the rising dawn, Captain Lyra Westmore stood alone on the observation deck, staring out at the wreckage of the Xanthian fleet. The victory was bittersweet. She had lost friends, comrades, and many innocent lives during the conflict. The hopeful Star's crew was gone, and she would never forget their sacrifice. But despite the weight of grief, there was a part of her that felt pride. They had fought back. They had fought for everything they loved, and they had won. Humanity had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. The comms crackled, and Lyra's second-in-command, Commander Shaw, spoke. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. They're ready for our return." Lyra nodded, taking one last look at the stars before turning to face her crew. "Let's go home," she said softly. As the rising dawn and the rest of Earth's fleet began their journey back to their homeworld, the mood was a complex mix of relief, exhaustion, and reflection. The war was not over, but humanity had proven something crucial. It had the strength to fight, to stand up against forces far more advanced and ruthless. It had made its mark on the galaxy, and that mark would not be easily forgotten. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. People gathered in the streets, their faces lit with pride and joy. Flags waved in celebration, but the somber reality of the war's cost was not lost on anyone. Memorials were quickly set up to honor the fallen, and the wounded were rushed to the best medical facilities humanity had to offer. Earth was united, not just in victory, but in the recognition that their fight had brought them closer together than ever before. As the fleet entered Earth's orbit, General Hall and Captain Westmore stood together, looking out at the planet below. The Earth they had fought to protect was the same Earth that had come together in unity, strength, and courage. It was a planet that would never again take its peace for granted, but also one that would never forget the cost of that peace. "We've won," Lyra said quietly, "but now we have to build something better, something stronger. This is just the beginning." The war had been long and brutal, but Earth had emerged victorious. The galaxy now knew one thing for certain: humanity would not be intimidated. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they were not just survivors. They were warriors. And as the ships descended toward Earth's surface, a new era began, one of hope, strength, and an unyielding will to protect what was theirs.